the other midot. And I had a chart last week, and I'll try to bring it up again, a chart of many midot, characteristics that some of us have, some of us are lacking, that we need to work on. If one works on the left toe, having a good heart, it will make it easier for him to be charitable, generous, patient. All of these good things that one may think they're independent of each other, they're really related or are greatly enhanced by one having a good heart. The best teacher is experience, as I pointed out before. Rabbis tell us who is smart, he who foresees the consequences of his actions. So by seeing or by hearing about the mistakes of others or about their weaknesses and what has happened to them as a result of those weaknesses, we can know how to deal with them if we have those weaknesses or if we know somebody that has those weaknesses. So that's why experience is very helpful. The real self is what you make of yourself. What does that have to do with anything? Even though we are what we are based on how we were born and what we received in our upbringing, but the real self will be determined once we are eulogized. And what happens when we are eulogized? Hopefully somebody will be saying the truth and not flattering, not making up stories, and they will be basically saying what this man or woman has made of themselves, despite their struggles, despite their hardships. That is your real self, what you have made of yourself. So don't worry about something that you may have that is not, you may see, if you're a Taurus here, you may like certain things, you may not like certain things, but the real self is what you make of yourself. And then regardless of one's astrological sign, everyone can be a mensch. Now I'll talk a little bit more about this point after we talk about Taurus. For those of you who do not know Yiddish, a mensch means a decent human being. He's a mensch, as we say, he will ben adam. In other words, regardless of what you have and what you were given by birth, you can make yourself a mensch. You can become a decent human being. And that is again through one's free will. So now we're going to go to Mazal Shor. This is just a brief description for those of you who are born between April 20 and May 20. What many of you will have in common is that this Mazal, called Taurus in English, is patient and reliable, warm-hearted and loving, persistent, determined, placid and security-loving. Now you may tell me, I know a Taurus that is not exactly very patient. Yes, it's possible, because remember, there are many little things that fine-tune the chart. But for the most part, they will be more patient than last Mazal. We spoke about, remember, Aries? You will notice a lot of differences between every Mazal. Patience is not one of the virtues of Aries. He's always in a hurry. He wants to get things done. He's always on to new projects. Patience is not his virtue, but it is the virtue of a Taurus. Taurus can be very patient. On the dark side, on the negative, they can be jealous and possessive, resentful and inflexible. The reason why they can be inflexible is because they have a lot of stubbornness, which we'll talk about later. Self-indulgent and greedy. I don't know if I would agree with this description that they're greedy, but they can be self-indulgent because they are materialistic. They like stability, being attracted, things that are natural, time to ponder, comfort and pleasure. And they dislike disruption, being pushed too hard, anything that is synthetic or man-made things, being rushed, being indoors. This is just a brief description of this sign. Taurus is an earth sign. The other earth signs are Capricorn and Virgo, which means that all three earth signs will have certain things in common. For example, stubbornness. Stubbornness is known as a trait of those who are the earth element, like the earth, solid as a rock, immovable. Stubbornness, rigid. But you have a different kind of stubbornness in Capricorn, in Taurus, and in Virgo. Even though they're all the same, they're somewhat different. Of all three, the most stubborn is Taurus. As I will point out, of all the three, Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo, the word, as we know, it's stubborn, is really Taurus. Then what is Capricorn? Capricorn doesn't like to be called stubborn. He likes to be called persistent. Well, is that stubbornness? Yes and no. It depends how it's used. once they make up their mind, they won't change it easily. That is true with Capricorn and Taurus, and not so much with Virgo, because they tend to be a little bit more flexible. So there are some differences between them, but they share a lot in common. So now I'm going to begin with the description of Taurus, then we're going to go over to the man and the woman and the children and the boss. If you have a boss, Taurus, it helps to know what he's like. Basically, the Taurus, they are very strong and quiet. They're silent. Their attitude is not very loud and noisy. You won't hear them talk too much. They speak sparingly. They speak, if necessary. They're not the very talkative people that you may meet. If you find a Taurus that is very talkative, it's possible that his rising sign, the hour, is a Gemini. Gemini is next week. Geminis can be very talkative. Some Geminis who are quiet. But again, there are some that are more into communication. Taurus is not into communication as much as other signs. They're solid and steady. Nothing easily disturbs their tranquility. You can shout at him, but if his mind is set, he won't budge an inch. This is typical Taurus. They won't budge an inch. Now, what about those Tauruses that will budge a little bit? Well, either because they're smart, right? Or because they're working on themselves, or they realize that it's in their best interest. But Saddam Hussein didn't budge even though he knew it was in his best interest. And he's a Taurus. I'm sorry if I offended any Taurus with mentioning Saddam Hussein, but we have to give good examples. Quite often, he prefers to be left alone. He's perfectly fine if he's by himself. There are some signs who don't like to be by themselves. They're more social. Taurus doesn't mind being by themselves. Don't disturb him, and they will remain very happy. They'll be contented. If you press him, he will become obstinate. If you shove too hard, prepare yourself for a big rage. What's interesting about Taurus, remember when we spoke about Aries, that they're quick to anger and quick to calm down? And we said, oh, that's great, at least he calms down. With Taurus, it's just the opposite. Many years can go by with perfect poise and control. Doesn't get angry. Then all of a sudden, unexpectedly, a pushy person or something similar to that will get in his way, and they will charge. His temper is seldom impulsive, but if he gets mad, stay out of the way. If they get mad, they're dangerous like a bull. They can be very, very dangerous if they get mad. But how often do they get mad? Once every couple of years. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that this was better than the one that gets angry often, even though he gets calmed down right away. Who wants to hear somebody getting angry every 10 minutes? So what if he calms down? It becomes difficult to live with that kind of a person who's always getting angry, even though he's calming down. The Taurus, okay, I have a couple of years to the next time around he gets upset. And he won't be upset for just any reason. It has to be something very, very serious. But if they get upset, they're very hard to control. Unless, of course, the person who marries them knows how to control a Taurus. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. They prefer to stay at home rather than go to the trouble of visiting others. And by the way, this description here is for men and women, but there are some differences between men and women. So if you're a woman Taurus, you may find some things are a little bit too harsh because they're more masculine. And again, some things might be more for women, but in general, a lot of this applies to both. They're not the social type, so they really prefer to stay at home than to go visiting others. A Taurus husband may refuse to accompany his wife to a friend's house if he is uncomfortable there. It's just if he's uncomfortable, he's not going to go. And a Taurus woman who does not approve of her husband's friends will not talk to them. Taurus is known to just ignore. If they don't like somebody, they'll just ignore them. And it sometimes comes across as very not polite, but that's the way they are. They're not fake. They are what they are. They're not ashamed of it. And if they don't like you, they'll show you their displeasure or their disapproval by just not talking. They just won't talk. And hopefully, some will get the message. The problem is that Leos and Aries don't get the message. They always try and try and try. There are certain signs that don't get the message. But some will get the message. They don't like change. Change upsets them. And so does noisy surroundings. They want quiet. They like getting away from all the clutter of the city and spending time in parks or strolling or just plain enjoying nature. They're very much into nature. You'll find a lot of Taurus they're gardeners. They like to garden. They like to do their landscape. They like the trees, the farms. A lot of farmers, a lot of people wanting to farming and agriculture are Taurus. They just like nature, the earth, and the quiet, the peace, and the tranquility. They have a passive nature and seldom worry or chew their nails. Now, the reason why I wrote this description of chew their nails, because we'll talk about some signs that have this problem. They get very anxious and they begin to chew their nails. They're nervous. Taurus is not the nervous type. They're more passive, and some of them are so stoic that they can easily take things in stride. Not everybody has that kind of a courage to just say, it's okay. I'm going to deal with it. It's not the end of the world. So what if you saw a cockroach? Big deal. That's the reaction of a Taurus. They can easily deal with the situation in a very stoic way. But if things don't go their way, they will brood over and become very gloomy. Because remember, Earth signs, including Capricorn and Taurus, have an inclination to become depressed, easily depressed, because they're more serious in nature. If things don't go right, they can become depressed. Now, Taurus does not get as depressed as Capricorn. Capricorn is so demanding of himself, Bezat Hashem, when we get to it, and he's so ambitious, and he works so hard to get to where he wants to, that if things don't go well, he really becomes depressed, much more than Taurus. Taurus is a lot more easygoing. He's quieter, he's slower. Mañana is another day, so if we can't do it today, right? So therefore, he won't get so depressed, but he can become very gloomy if things are not going his way. Patience is one of their virtues, as I pointed out, and they can carry emotional and physical burdens in silence without complaining. Bezat Hashem will be talking about a characteristic that in Yiddish we call kvetchers. There are some people who are a kvetch. You know what a kvetch is in English? They are a nag. Nagging. Very dependent, overly dependent on someone else. Not everybody knows how to deal with them. And I won't tell you who they are today. But there are people like that. What can we do? Nagging, they need somebody who's very good to them, who's patient to them, who will calm them down, who will assuage their fears. But anyway, Baruch Hashem, Taurus doesn't have that problem. On the contrary, they're able to take pain and be quiet about it and not share it with anybody else. They won't complain. If you tell a Taurus that he's stubborn, he will tell you that he's just being patient and firm. He doesn't call it stubbornness. He says, that's what I need to do to get what I want. But the truth of the matter is that they are obstinate and they are really glued to their opinions. They have an opinion, they don't change their opinion so often. The problem is that many of them, especially the children, when they're young, they're so stubborn that they won't listen to what the doctor tells them to do. Aquarius also has the problem. Aquarius is what we call in Yiddish an Iber Chochom. You know what an Iber Chochom is? Aquarius thinks he's smarter than the doctor. He knows more. The doctor doesn't know what he's talking about because they are somewhat rebellious. Aquarius is not always conventional, likes to do things different. But the problem with the Taurus is he's not trying to be different. He won't listen. He won't obey. He's not going to tell me what to do. So sometimes that could be a problem with those who are very stubborn. Not every Taurus is that stubborn that he's not going to listen to what his doctor tells him, especially if it's in best interest. But they can be a problem. Now we're going to come to the good that they all have. They are extremely devoted, and they make perhaps one of the most loyal friends. If you have a Taurus as a friend, then you better safeguard that friendship. It's worth its weight in gold. They can make the most loyal friends. And their pockets are wide open to real friends in real trouble. To them, a friend is a friend. Not just a colleague or an acquaintance. They're a real friend. They may have very few friends, but those few are real. Whereas a Leo and Aries will say, oh, I have hundreds of friends. And none of those hundreds of friends are real friends. They're rarely cruel and vindictive. Did I pronounce that right?
Vindictive.
Vindictive? Who decided if it's vindictive or vindictive? Anyway, English is not a phonetic language, so it's hard to figure it out. But anyway, cruelty, and we will see which signs are cruel. There are some signs that have to deal with cruelty, and you have to know that, you know. But then, usually they are not. They have a capacity for lasting love. In other words, if they love you, they care about you, ad me'ad esrim, it will be till 120. You know how some people who are married to each other cannot part? If a Taurus marries the right person,